Today's podcast is a part of a series about the members of a network that I am a part of called Women Execs on Boards. All of the women in this series have completed programs through the Harvard Business School to prepare them for corporate governance. I wanted to tell their stories because I'm so inspired by the women who are in this network. They are high-level, high-profile women, but when you look behind the scenes, you see that they have worked very hard to get to where they are. They've been through so many different trials, traumas, and they've just kept getting back up and climbing and working hard to get to the top. And the really amazing thing is that they're leaving the ladder down and reaching back down in the organizations to pull up other women and men into leadership positions. And so I can't wait for you to hear their story. I hope you enjoy this podcast series. Welcome to Real Life, Real Leaders. Today, I want to introduce you to my friend and network member and colleague, Florence Tandy. Florence is the CEO of Leadership Bridges. And Leadership Bridges is an organization that does all kinds of great things for nonprofits and maybe for profits as well. We'll hear about that too. But they're a consulting agency, and they do capacity building, compliance, leadership development, succession planning, and probably a whole lot more. Because as I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking about Florence's background and experience, and she was a very senior leader in a large nonprofit, several nonprofits, and she also has really been a mentor out to the community. And I think we all interact with nonprofits on a regular basis, but we don't really think about the leadership. And Florence is a great leader for nonprofits. And so we wanted to have her on the program to share a little bit about her journey and some of the things she's learned in nonprofit leadership. And just so you know, like as far as awards, she has been named Nonprofit Executive of the Year for the Kentucky Nonprofit Network, and also Outstanding Woman of Northern Kentucky. So Florence, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yes, it's going to be fun. So I would love for you to share a little bit about your career. So maybe tell us, how did you get to this place? And start way back at college. Like, what happened?
Who knows what happens from college on, but I went to the University of Kentucky, as all good Kentuckians are supposed to do. And I majored in political science, thinking I was going to be a foreign correspondent or something equally exciting as that. And it just didn't really happen to me. I know I didn't make it happen either. I didn't really pursue that after college, after graduation, but I kind of fell into nonprofit work after college and really never looked back. I applied for some corporate kinds of positions, and I knew I would do well in those. But once I discovered nonprofit work, where everything is mission-based rather than the bottom line or the shareholders or what the quarterly report says this quarter for the investors, it just seemed like I needed to be there. So I had a string of smaller nonprofit types of jobs until I was asked to start a hospital-based fundraising foundation for my hometown hospital, and did that for a few years until I landed a couple of other CEO positions and ended my nonprofit career as the CEO of, like you said, a large nonprofit here in the greater Cincinnati area called Northern Kentucky Community Action Commission, and I served that organization for a little over 13 years and retired from there to establish my own consulting company so that I could give back to the nonprofit setting, to the nonprofit community, but by using my skills that I had learned through the School of Hard Knocks along the way. I also, along the way, went back to school and got my master's in organizational leadership that really refocused my leadership journey in I think, a more effective direction. So
I
that's
saw that. And we do, we do a lot of the same work as well. So I may have a few questions around some of that because I'm sure it is a little different, working with nonprofits versus working with corporate. Maybe it's a lot different. And so tell us, go ahead.
well, I think it's different and it's the same. It's completely different emphasis, but leadership is leadership. Team building
That's
is
right.
compliance is compliance. It might be government grant compliance, or it might be SEC compliance, or it might be investor relations, but it's still, people, still people.
It is. And even though it says nonprofit, that doesn't mean you can get along without making any money, right?
Oh no, you cannot get along without making some money. When I started in Northern, I was this was a surprise to me. It was kept a nice little secret by the board. When I walked in day one, it was in a deficit spending mode with zero
Oh my goodness.
cushion in the
And you
background.
immediately had to worry about payroll.
I did, and I worried about that for a couple of years, so we turned that around. But
So actually, technically, nonprofit just means you're not pulling out the profits for dividends and things like that, right? It's going
correct.
back into
Put
the
the profits
company.
back into the mission of the organization.
Mm-hmm. So when you were there at the Northern Kentucky Community Action Commission, tell us a little bit about that. I'm not familiar with that. What is
Well,
it?
community action agencies are across the country. There's about 1,000 in the country, and the organizations typically work with low-income families to help them become self-reliant through a variety of programs that include income enhancement, like helping pay emergency bills when they get behind, but also improving their housing situation, providing job training, providing different kinds of education. One of the more common programs community action agencies run is Head Start, which most people have heard of. So
Yes.
we had a rather large Head Start program at the two community action agencies. I served as CEO, and then the third one that I served as associate director. And job training to help people achieve better positions and better incomes. And we provided one of my most fun things that we did when I was at Northern was to establish an affordable housing complex that only accepted single parents who were enrolled in college full time. So we helped with their housing situation, we helped with their community and family situation, and we gave them the grace and room to pursue a higher education goal. So
I saw that in your bio, and I saw that when I first saw it, like you took a building that was not being used and you turned it around, correct?
It was an old, actually originally an African American high school that had closed when the school system integrated in the 60s. It had been used for a short time as an integrated school and then as a community center for another couple of years. It closed about, I don't know, 14, 15 years before we um, started repurposing it. And you walk in, and it was just the creepiest building because basically, when they closed it, they just locked the doors and walked away. So desks and tables and chairs and things were still there in the daycare center in the basement. There was still a box of cereal sitting on the counter
Oh
with
my
a bowl
goodness.
next to it. Now, I don't know if
Wow.
the cereal had any actual cereal in it. I didn't want to check, but I mean, it was
That's sort of
like a ghost.
fascinating.
It was weird that it was in such a good shape, but it was a good, sturdy, strong building. So we were able to rehab the building and then build another addition on the back to have 42 units of
What a great creative endeavor. I mean, that was my thinking when I read that in your bio. I was like, wow, that's very creative. And I'm sure nonprofit leadership requires some creativity.
It was the most fun project I ever worked on. And we weren't the first to do it. There's a group in Kentucky that established the first, what they call scholar houses in the region. And we collaborated with them to use some of their model in developing it and then kind of made it our own version. But it was just such an honor to be entrusted with this building. The city of Covington gave us the building to use, and then such an honor to um, carry forward the African American education tradition that was in the school into a new educational mission that celebrated the history of the building. So it was
I
not.
really love that. And, it's making me think about the whole idea, behind, systemic change needing to happen.
Yes.
Because what you're talking about there is systemic change where, you're helping people to get higher educated, get better jobs, have the food, the housing that they need to get out of that. And I actually had an experience that I had a family member who got in trouble and ended up in prison. And this was a business person who came out then with a felony, and that changed the person's life. So instead of you can imagine. And so what happened then was he remarried and everything, but they ended up living, in between the bad part of town and the moderate part of town. And so I saw for the first time really up close the systemic problem. And so what I mean by that is, he got a job, worked really hard, and then he saved to buy a welder so he could start digging back out and to get himself back into a better position. And so because where he lived, the welder was soon stolen.
Oh, yeah.
So he had to take out a loan to, and
Well,
save money.
Insurance on the
Insurance didn't cover it because it wasn't locked up because he didn't have any place to lock it up.
Right.
And, so then he didn't have the money to get a new welder. So, it's like it was just an inkling into what happens all the time for people who are trying to get themselves out of it. So that's why I think that's fantastic, the mission.
Story after story of that.
Yes,
exactly. One car repair, one medical bill, one stolen piece of equipment away from falling deeper in the hole. And that's what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to make some changes.
We do.
Tell me about leading in a nonprofit. What are some of the particular leadership challenges?
Gosh, in a nonprofit environment, let me think about that a minute. Well, part of the challenge that maybe for-profit executives wouldn't face is we have so many different kinds of stakeholders and customers, if you will. We have to work closely with our communities. Government officials play a big part in what we do. We have a different kind of clientele and customer that many for-profit businesses would have. And we have funders, donors, grant makers who also have a stake in what we do. And all of those different constituencies will try to put their own flavor on compliance, on their different kinds of requirements, different kinds of challenges that they expect us to, miraculously,
if they're going to give their money,
we're going to end poverty with their $10,000 grant this quarter. And so that it's kind of challenging to deal with all those different constituencies. And the other challenge in a nonprofit environment and leading in a nonprofit environment is just simply the finances. We have good finances at Northern and the other organizations that I've led, but good compared to a corporate setting is a little different. Pay was always a problem. Because of the kind of work that we did, we had in many nonprofits, we had many facilities across a wide area because low-income families can't always get to a centralized location. So we would spread out our services into different facilities. And so that was, high facility costs, challenges with staff wages and benefits to keep good staff and keep them trained and keep them performing at top levels so that our outcomes are high to also attract more funders and more donors. So
did you also have volunteers in your?
Oh yes. And the kind of organization that I worked in throughout my career, not as many volunteers in some of the services, but of course board members were all volunteers, and we had some advisory councils that were volunteers, and our main volunteer brigade, I would say, would be in our Head Start centers where parents and communities too, community members and college students and high school students and such would come in and do volunteer projects, and corporate volunteers as well would come in and maybe paint a classroom or something like that. So we had a lot of volunteers, but in a larger nonprofit that is relied on to be a professionally run organization, you can't totally rely on volunteers. Volunteers can fill in and help, and they're wonderful in the leadership area of a nonprofit, like in a board setting. We couldn't do without our professional volunteers on a board, but day to day, it was professional staff and some entry level staff. I was always proud when we were able to provide a job for someone who had been a recipient of some of our services in the past. Train them up to become part of our professional staff.
Extra bonus.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Today's podcast is brought to you by EDA, a human capital firm that provides leadership development for your top of the house executives. One of our services is C-suite and executive coaching. If you think about professional sports, every player has a coach, even at the highest levels. Coaches help us maximize our strengths and achieve our true potential. And just like professional athletes, even the best of the corporate leaders need and can benefit from a coach. Through executive coaching, the tenured coaches at EDA will help you set your vision, analyze strengths, identify opportunities, and eliminate obstacles. If you're interested in coaching for yourself or some of your leaders, please reach out to learn more at www.executivedevelopment.com. So you have a lot of people, pulling at you from different ways. And, tell me about, we all go through times, that are particularly difficult in our careers.
Yes.
And, sometimes they're really bad and we don't know how to get through it and all of that in the time. But, later we can look back and say, we did well, we could have done better, whatever. But tell us about one of the more difficult experiences in your career that you had to face.
Well, first of all, I call those crucible moments. When you're in the crucible and you just wondering what's gonna grind you down next.
Yes, like 2020.
Crucible year would be
collective crucible year.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness, what a year this has been. I've had a couple of really challenging times during my career, both professionally and personally, that affected professional work.
Sure.
But when I first came to Northern, as I mentioned, we were in deficit situation. We had no money. The staff was low morale, would not even describe the staff composition. And I had one staff person, and of course, backing up a bit, I walked in and knew we had to make changes fast, and it wasn't like we could slowly work into these changes. We were in a crisis situation and had to make quick changes. And so I was doing, 1, 2, 3, 4 changes.
Mm-hmm.
I had a staff person that had loved the old way and had little accountability and little expectations on her time or her outcomes. And when she realized that there was more to me than just the new person in the big office, she started a campaign with the board to get me fired. And this
Oh
was
boy.
within 3 months of me arriving. And so she was writing these, I don't know, 5, 10, 15-page letters to the board over and over. And the board was reviewing them and affirming what I was doing. And but still, it took a lot of time, a little legal advice here and there, and a lot of um, energy that the board didn't need to expend. I didn't need to expend in those first few months of developing myself as a new leader in a new organization,
Mm-hmm.
in a new community. But we worked through it. When the board said, no, she's doing fine. Yeah, you just deal with it. Finally, once and for all, she decided that maybe she didn't want to stay there and resigned. So it was a blessing in the way that it happened
Yes,
in retrospect, but it was a challenging time.
that
It
would
was
be challenging. It's such a distraction.
yeah, it is. And I think women experience that a lot more than men do. I had another employee that didn't do something to that drastic of a situation in early in my career. And I was just shocked at how somebody could be so deceiving and nasty about just trying to ruin somebody's career. And
Yes,
so,
I've
gave
seen that.
me
I've seen that
stronger
as well.
back, but it's been challenging. And I think women, like I say, I don't see that happening to men like it does to women.
I would say it happens more to women for
Yeah,
sure. I have seen it happen to men, and it's quite, shocking and painful for them too.
yes, it is. It is.
Yeah.
The
So
other
what about the other one?
unfortunate moment would be a different sort of thing. We had an employee who we all loved, and she was just great. She was in our finance department, a bookkeeper in the finance department, and she called in sick right after Thanksgiving, and was fine. And we thought, well, when is she coming back? And she was gone almost a week, and we had checked on her, and people in her department had checked on her, and she was scheduled to come back Monday, but Saturday she committed suicide.
Oh, goodness.
Nobody knew that she was struggling in our organization. I don't know if her family did or not. Nobody knew that she was struggling. Nobody had any inkling whatsoever that she needed our help to get through a difficult situation. And it was just such a sad situation that I know we could have helped with her if she had reached out or if we had been aware of the signals. We still, to this day, I didn't see any of the warning signs, even in retrospect. But helping the staff heal from that was a hard period in our time. It made us stronger on the other side, but it was not a fun thing to go through.
Oh,
So
I can't imagine how
yeah,
devastating that would be. And it's just so important when you're going through difficult times to share with people you need
right,
help.
yeah,
And a lot of people don't want to share, but most people will help if you reach out. So
yes,
I'm
yeah.
I'm I'm sure there was some guilt even just like not recognizing it.
Oh, absolutely. All of us were like, why didn't we see that she was struggling? And she carpooled with another employee in our department, and she didn't see it, even though we were having all these personal conversations and talking about their families and their home life and all this stuff, and the mutes back and forth. She still to this day didn't recognize the signs. So anybody that's listening, if you are struggling, tell somebody, reach
Yes.
out, call the suicide hotline. If you
Yes, please do. absolutely. Okay, so looking back where you are today, is there anything you would have done differently than you did at the time on either one of those scenarios?
On the employee that was struggling, maybe I mean, I don't know what I would have done differently. I think we handled the after the fact very well as an organization and with staff and with making counseling available and talking it out and being supportive of staff who were struggling as a result. But if if I had gotten to know her better or had more conversations, maybe I could have discerned some struggles she was having, but I don't think I could have done anything different in that situation.
Well, and I will say one thing though, just you're reminding me of a meeting that we had where we had the main, I don't know if he was captain or what he was, the leader who was in the Black Hawk Down, not in the movie, but the real one.
Oh wow.
And he was talking to us, and we were asking about the whole scenario, and he said the movie had a lot of drama and stuff that wasn't exactly. but one of the things he said is that one of the early people that was killed in that whole scenario was a really good soldier. And he said what he regrets is that he spent so much time on the troublemakers and didn't get to know his really good soldiers.
That's a really good insight, right? Yeah, you spend, what is it, the rule of thumb is the Pareto rule is 80-20, 80% of the time you spend on the
20, yeah,
20 on the
20% of the people.
So yeah.
But you sort of reminded me of that because, I mean, yeah, like how would you know? What about the other one where the woman was going around you to the board? Is there anything, looking back that you do different?
I think if I had started off day one developing more relationships with the old guard, so to speak, and figuring out what really motivated them and what I could do to help them excel in their career, it might have made a difference.
Well, it's definitely worth a try when you come in to get to know, the old guard and make them mentors in some way.
I was doing that, but not quickly enough and not, I'll say deliberately enough.
Mm. Well, and it probably wasn't a priority because you had such a financial mess.
Right.
You were thinking.
I'm sorry?
Survival.
Yeah.
Now you reminded me of something. So the whole scenario reminds me, years ago, I ended up writing an article about people who couldn't make the curve. And what I mean by that is, when a new vision or a new leader comes in and starts taking the organization in a new way, many times some of the people who have been there for a long time can't make it.
Right.
And it isn't that there are not good people, and it isn't even that they're not good performers in some area. It's just that they can't get on board, so they become poor performers. And sometimes, I just want to give leaders a little permission. I know you do leadership stuff too, is permission to, not feel bad about that, because sometimes they'll do better somewhere else.
Right. Oh yeah. And we've all worked with people just like that. And they're not in the right seat on the right bus. And
exactly.
As the leadership gurus tell us. And so it is our job as leaders to help them realize that, or help them develop the skills and the mental fortitude to power through to become that right person in that correct seat. Many times I've had carrying the difficult conversations with staff about maybe this isn't your right fit.
Right, and it doesn't have to be a mean thing. We can help them go find the next thing.
I have some staff who have I've had those conversations with that are still dear friends, and I have some staff who were angry, mean, mad at me when we had that conversation, and years later contacted me and said,
thank you.
Right, thank you. you really changed my trajectory.
Yes. So during all this time, you probably also had family that you had to take care of. So talk a little bit about how to be a leader when you also have, all these external things that pull on your time.
Right. In the in an economic downturn in the early 2000s, my husband had owned his own business for many years, and it was a passion for him, and we were trying to build that business. But in an economic downturn, he had to close the business. He had a couple of partners that they had a terrible falling out, and he all of a sudden, where he was motivated and working every day and doing what he loved, all of a sudden he had nothing to do and no kind of natural pathway to move forward. At the same time, I was working in that hospital foundation, as I mentioned, and it had a new CEO that was going a different direction, and I was worried about my own career. But then I was the breadwinner with the insurance and retirement plan and all of those things. So, and our children were in elementary and high school at the time, I believe. And so I had those worries, and it was challenging. I chose to leave the hospital where I loved the job, but it was just too scary to another position that put me on the trajectory that I ended up with. So it turned out okay, but it was a challenging time wondering when, and I was paying every one of the bills and wondering which bill we were going to pay next or which one we were going to delay paying. And the job that I took was several hours away toward your direction. It was in Missouri, and uh, it was a wonderful position, but it was far away from family, and they were to move at the end of the school year to join me in Missouri, and it didn't turn out that way. I came back this way instead, but it was hard. It was lonely. It was a time when I didn't feel like I could share my struggles with my family, both in my nuclear family and my extended family. I just didn't feel like I had anybody to talk to that either would understand or wouldn't judge. So
Yes.
it felt really lonely for
Yes.
a couple of
Well,
years.
and I'm glad you shared that story because, in 2020, we have a lot of people who had very successful businesses who are having to close,
Right,
especially in the, retail and the restaurant businesses and things like that. I mean, the whole world is just shaken up.
yeah,
And, the downturn, that you're talking about, a lot of businesses closed then too.
yeah.
And so, people feel bad, they feel like failure, but sometimes there are things you cannot control.
Right. Yeah. And my husband was in the recording and video uh, business, and that industry was changing drastically during that time. Did home recordings, and it was moving to digital. And then with the downturn, most of his business was advertising. And with
Mm-hmm.
the downturn, people want advertising, so he didn't have
Mm-hmm.
aspiring recording star, and he didn't have the advertising, so it just kind of all came crashing down.
Right. So that's the technological disruption as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So what did you do? So you didn't really have people that you could talk to, all the weight's on your shoulders. And how did you handle it?
I just shouldered through one day. Every day was just one more day, and I think kind of threw myself into work and into making a plan for how we were going to get through it. So, paying attention to my kids as best as possible, cheering them on the soccer field, and watching them excel academically. trying not to share too much with them of the burden or of the stress that I was going through. So I just soldiered through day and day. Might have had a little bit more wine than I should
I
have.
was going to say, no vices. You did exercise, journal, drink.
I exercised a bit. I'm not a great exerciser, so I wish I would have done more of that. But the wine was probably kind of got me through a few evenings of
Yes.
I,
Yeah, I was thinking this morning, it's like I was thinking I'm not very good at moderation because I overwork, play too hard, work too hard. And then I was thinking, except in exercise, I'm pretty good at being in moderation when it comes
oh,
to
that's the
exercise.
reframing I've been looking for. Thank you.
Yep, I'm pretty good at that.
All right, way to reframe it for me.
Yeah, reframe it exactly. So, so looking back though, if you could say something to your younger self that was getting ready to go through all of that, what would you say?
There is light at the end of the tunnel, even though you don't think there is. If
Mm-hmm.
you stay positive, and I've always been a positive person, looking on the bright side, even when it seems pretty dark. So, in those times, you just have to continue to stay positive, focused on getting through whatever period you need to. So, if it's getting through to the next paycheck, get through to that. If it's getting through to getting that better job or getting, or in that case, my husband getting a good job
Mm-hmm.
and getting past his emotional letdown from all of that experience. Um, Probably I would have sought some counseling for him, for me, maybe for our marriage,
Yes,
if I had, to do it over again.
that's good advice. You know, I I do want to say that sometimes the tunnel's quite long.
Yes.
So I agree completely. You will get through it, and but the tunnel can be very long, and so just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and like you said, maybe take it in bite-sized pieces instead of
That's all you
you
can do is,
don't try to conquer the whole thing.
yeah.
So as you think about people who are still out there, sort of fighting in their career and climbing the ladder, or maybe they're in leadership roles already. Maybe they're the CEO. Any advice that you have for others besides, putting one foot in front of the other when it's difficult?
Develop a network of people that are safe to talk to, that you feel in supported and loved even when you're struggling.
Mhm.
So especially for women, any kind of networking group that is nurturing for you. In this women execs on boards
Right.
has been that for a lot of us, I think. But
Yes.
develop people, a group of people that maybe in completely and probably better in completely different industries from what you are in, so that it's a safe place to just walk in and scream if you need to, and just say, these people are driving me crazy, just if you
Yeah.
need to. That I think has helped me regain, I guess, my sanity, is having a few groups of people that I can be with and be myself with and vent to in a safe way that won't affect my career or won't affect my family relationships because it's safe.
You know, that that's absolutely true. Like in our network that we have, one of the things I love about it is the just being committed to each other's success.
Right.
And
Oh,
and
yeah.
it does help that very few of us are competing with each other, because
Right.
then there's no conflict. So it does help if it's a little bit maybe outside of your day to day, because that's a safe place. But the other thing you're making me think about is it's important to be a good member of a group like that,
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah.
not be judgmental and
Right.
be supportive.
And be a listener when it's needed.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to vent, but sometimes you need to listen too.
Yes, that you reminded me what so one time I read the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus book.
Yeah,
Remember that one?
yeah.
Which I didn't really agree with all of it, but because I felt like they were generalizing the male female too much,
Sure.
because I knew a lot of females who were the ones who were more quiet than the males. But
Right.
one of the things they said is that, as a guy, they were saying, that men typically try to solve the problem.
Right.
And it sometimes we just need to listen and just be like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, that's
My
rough.
husband has never figured out how to solve. I need to solve the problem part of our relationship. He always wants. He doesn't want to hear me vent. He wants to step
Fix
in
it.
and fix it.
Yeah. And then if you don't fix it the way they want, then they're frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, tell us what
Yeah.
you're doing today. Thank you for the advice, and talk about today. So today you're running your company. What do you love doing? And then tell us about your board work.
So in my company, well, it changed a lot under COVID because people aren't doing those kinds of things these days. They're just buckling in, especially nonprofits, buckling in, trying to preserve their staff and preserve their programming, and they're not as focused on employee development and organizational development as they maybe would have been without COVID. So my business life has taken a big hit during COVID, but I'm still doing some interesting projects with people, doing some staff training, staff development, mentoring, and coaching of young developing professionals for a few organizations and individuals. Um, the thing that I love so much about the work I'm able to do is watching through providing some support and some tools for professionals who are struggling uh, with their work, and providing that support of, you can do it, you can get through this, you've got the talent, the skills to do it, you just need to focus them better, and help them learn to do that through tools that we'll work on together. And then see that aha moment in their eyes. I know you experience this a lot
Yes.
too in your work. And that confidence starting to build, and that performance starting to just blossom is so rewarding.
Yes.
And then organizationally, to help an organization that's been maybe struggling with some board relationships, board work, or board performance issues, and helping them with some tools for developing agendas and creating a board calendar and things that will help the executive help the board be a success in a
Putting some
nonprofit.
infrastructure into place.
Yeah, put that structure in place that many nonprofit executives, probably for-profit executives too, if they'd be honest with themselves, don't necessarily have that governance gene in them, and they have to figure it out. And so if you can help them figure those things out, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Well, that's a great point, because leaders, they do a great job as a leader. So then they get put on boards, and it's like, oh, by osmosis, you're going to know what to do. So.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that so much of what we talk about, and some of the things we've done for the execs on boards, is moving on a board, in a board position, moving from an operations or a leadership role as a CEO or C-suite person to a board member where that's not your role anymore. It's for advice and strategy. It's not for doing the work. And that's a hard thing if you've got a blue ribbon board in a nonprofit where you want, your lawyers and your accountants and your do-gooders too, when they can't get past that. But I want to do this work. stuff. It
Right.
can cause all kinds of havoc. So,
Well, and some people really aren't good board members because of that. If they really can't make the shift to governance versus management, it's probably not the right role.
yep.
So, are you on some boards today? Tell us.
I am on the Kentucky Nonprofit Network's board of directors. I'm vice president this year and next, and that has been a passion of mine to help the nonprofit community in general, to improve in capacity and professionalism. And so this board has been a fun thing to be involved in. I was on 5 or 6 boards or advisory committees of one sort or another when I was at Northern, and left all those behind and wanted to focus on my consulting, but also on building the network, and then perhaps hopefully working my way toward a corporate board opportunity down the road. So I left all those behind, but said I wanted to do this one thing. I'm also doing some volunteer work and that kind of thing. I'm still in my Rotary Club and doing some mentoring and things with some executives on a volunteer basis. But that's the one board I'm on right now.
Well, and based on our experience working with you and the network, there's no doubt in my mind you'll be a great corporate board member when you find the right one. And so I really just want to thank you for being on the program. What a great career you've had so far. I know you have a lot left to give, and I really appreciate you sharing some of your story with us.
Well, I appreciate all you've shared with me over the few years that we've gotten to know each other, and you've been such a good role model for me and for so many of us who have gone through Women Execs program, or Women on Board program at Harvard, but now the network. And
Yes.
You and Lisa Pitt built that out of whole cloth, and I am so impressed that you created this network that continues to inspire and challenge me. And thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. A special thank you to our listeners for taking time to tune in to this week's Real Life, Real Leaders podcast. We hope today's story inspired you. Check out previous episodes on the podcast to hear from more industry leaders, and check back next week as we speak to another leader and hear his or her great stories of triumphs and messy struggles. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, subscribe, and share. I'm Bonnie Hageman, and I look forward to sharing more with you next week.